in national income determination, we're going to look at basically how do we figure out a model of determining the GDP or national income of the economy. Does that make sense? So when you look at GDP or national income of the economy, remember we said that GDP has three methods: the output method, the income, expenditure. But now we're going to make a model which can help us predict. Why are we making a model? We are making a model because when you make a model, let's say if I say, this is the GDP right now, let's say $500 million is GDP right now, right? And let's say you want to increase your GDP. What are the variables that you will change for us to make the GDP to go up? Are you all with me? So this model is basically going to help us predict GDP of the country. Okay, so when you look at national income, we will start off by building a macroeconomic model, and we're going to use something called the Keynesian model. And this is after what we call an economist of the 20th century called John Maynard Keynes. So if you look at macroeconomics is pretty divided. There are many schools of thought. There is the Keynesians, which is built after John Maynard Keynes, and another one is what we call the monetarist, which is another school of thought. And there is another school of thought which is the classical school of thought. Remember Adam Smith? Adam Smith. So post Adam Smith, there was a whole idea about how markets are really strong. So those ideas of like how market forces the demand and supply is basically the Adam Smith school of thought. And from then onwards, there is a whole school of thought which is called the classical. So first it was the classical. I just want to quickly talk about the historical perspective. First, it all began with the classical economists. Then came your Keynesians, and then came your monetarists. So if you look at the 1800s, economics were all about the classical school of thought, which began from Adam Smith. Then in the 1920s, post what you call it, World War One, the recession that was happening in the world was pretty long and painful, and a lot of people were like, why isn't this recession ending? And the classical school of thought, just to let you guys know, the classical school of thought used to be championing free market and no need for government, and let the remember Adam Smith used to have this invisible hand theory. Let the market operate freely and the market will fix itself. But in the 1920s, when the unemployment was very long and painful, a lot of people started questioning, and this is where Keynes said there's a whole role economy in an economy of the government. The government needs to come and rescue the economy, otherwise the economy will fail. And that's where the whole school of thought of the Keynesian school of thought started. And then in the 1970s, uh, another sort of movement started, which was the monetarist, primarily by a professor in University of Chicago, Milton Friedman, who also got a Nobel Prize. He came up with this idea, like the government probably is not the best machine to fix the economy. And he came up with the idea that, when you look at inflation that happens primarily because government is printing money recklessly. Government prints money whenever there's a need for expenditure. Government prints money, and that could cause inflation to happen. And they just said that happens because the government needs money, of course, to fix the economy and all that. So from that thought onward, the whole monetarist school of thought came about, where money supply became a key issue to look at. And so we're going to talk about all of these things, but this Keynesian model is what we'll study in this chapter, because this will help us figure out how we can predict economic national income for the whole economy, and how we can change various variables to make the national income go up. Let's say there is a recession happening. Let's say government is trying to fix it. What are the various things the government can do to fix it? How much do you need to put in? Right now, in the US, there is a whole bailout happening, the stimulus package. Trump gave a stimulus package, and now Biden also is sort of saying this, like, we're going to save the economy, we're going to have this much. Why is government spending this money? How will it change my GDP? And the answer is that significantly, and what we'll see in this chapter. So this chapter is all about that. Make sense, guys? Are we good? Are we good? So just a little bit of history. So first came the the classical economists, then came the Keynesians. So let me write this here for us to understand. So there was this classical school of thought, then came the Keynesians, then we have the monetarists. Okay, monetarists. And by the way, there's also another school of thought called, supply side economists. Those are also people that we'll discuss when we do the chapter on policies. Because remember when we did AS economics, we were talking about supply side policies along with fiscal policy and monetary policy. Fiscal policy is basically these guys because they believe a lot in government expenditure. So fiscal policy is Keynesian's favorite tool. Monetarists are all about money supply, so that's why the monetary policy is coming from here. Then came the supply side economists who believe that labor markets need to be fixed as well. Those are also like by the way, and these guys also believe in supply side. They believe in supply side. Supply side policy is kind of like a common theme which is there. So guys, just to look at this model, we discussed this earlier. We said this that Y is equal to your income, YD is equal to, or Y is equal to CD, your domestic consumption, plus withdrawal. And I discussed this last time. I said that your income will either be consumed domestically or you may pay taxes or you may save or you may spend on imports. Right? Remember we came up with these three. Y is equal to CD plus W, which means either your income will be consumed domestically or you might save some of it or the government will take it in terms of taxes or you may buy imports. So Y is equal to CD plus W was the first equation. Right? And the second equation was second equation, remember, was AE or aggregate expenditure was CD plus what, guys? Plus J, right? Which means CD plus I plus G plus X. So your expenditure in economy, remember this is expenditure. Now, somebody will be like, why didn't you write M? Because I wrote CD here. If I wrote C only, then I will subtract M because CD means no M. But when I write C plus I plus G plus X minus M, right? I need to subtract M because I'm only looking at CD. So C minus M, in other words, C minus M is your CD. Consumption overall minus import will be domestic consumption. So that's why I wrote CD plus J. So this is your second equation. Right? We've done this before. I'm just going to recap this for us, for our understanding. So Y is equal to CD plus W and Y is equal to CD and A is equal to CD plus J is our equation, guys. Does that make sense? Any questions before we move on? Now, we said this that in equilibrium, just to make you guys remember this, we said this that in equilibrium, Y is equal to AE, right? And W must equal to J. That's something which we established last time. We said that if W was not equal to J, W will become ultimately equal to J. But this is the equation. These are the two results we formed, right? The W must equal to J and Y must equal AE in equilibrium, okay? In this equilibrium, by the way, this may not be true, but in equilibrium, this has to hold true. Okay, makes sense, guys? Any questions before we move on? So guys, Y is equal to A and W is equal to J is basically the two equations that we formed. Now, how do we use this? And I have done this here. This whole discussion is about that, which I've already done in the older sort of discussion. So AE must equal to CD plus J and Y is equal to CD plus W. And we say that this should become equal, right? And so Y is equal to A should be the two things. Y is equal to A and W is equal to J are the two things we need to remember. Now, how do we build a model? And I want to sort of give you a quick big summary here. One thing we need to remember, this chapter is going to be easy as long as we are consistently sort of on it, as in don't miss a class, make sure that you write your notes, and there is a lot of writing you'll do because I'm not going to be dictating you, I'm going to be doing a lot of math. You need to have that working with you for your own understanding. So do not not write. I mean, you people at home also, you need to have your whole notes because it's going to be easy. You are probably going to be relying only on your notes and not on my notes, because my notes would have stuff that you will be reading, but you can quickly get it like super easily. Make sense? So you need to make sure. Okay, guys. So what is the whole structure going to look like? So we are building basically what we call a 4-sector model, which is going to be AE is equal to C plus I plus G plus X minus M. Now, why do we call it 4-sector model? Is because first we start off with the 2-sector model, which is C plus I. What is C plus I? C plus I would have what we call, it's called a 2-sector model. We start off with this, which has two players only, firms and household. Okay, so we'll begin with only 2 players, which is 2-sector model. It's also called, another name for 2-sector model, guys, is called closed economy with no government. Why am I calling it closed? Closed because there is no X minus M, no international trade. Open economy means international trade. Closed economy means no international trade. And no government means no government means no government sector. So that's why it's called closed economy with no government. Okay? Does that make sense? Any questions? Right? That's why it's called 2-sector model. When I move to talk about C plus I plus G, now I'm going to include, guys, I'm going to include C plus I plus G, which means I'm stopping here. What is going to be now, what is this going to be called? We call it 3-sector model. So C 3-sector model is basically C plus I plus G. And what do we include in this? This is where firms and household as well as government is also included. That's why, what should be the name for this? Yeah, 3 sectors, but what should I call it? Should I call it closed economy with government? So that's a good name for that. We call it closed economy. Good job. Closed economy with government. And I'm saying this because, you know, your MCQs will be designed in a manner. They will say, hey, it's a closed economy with government, or it's an open economy and all that. So you need to figure out your model in your head and so on. And then comes the 4-sector model, which is called, now we move on to the 4-sector model, which where I'm moving here also. The 4-sector model is going to be open economy, which means international trade is happening with government. So there are, all the players are there. So you have government, you have households, you have firms, and you even have international trade happening. Okay, so we're going to build up from a 2-sector model to a 3-sector model to a 4-sector model. That's how we're going to move as we go along. Any questions before we move on? Do we all get that, guys? Am I lagging? Okay, let me just try to. Is it true for everyone? Is everyone finding the video to lag? Munib, other than Munib? For all others, is that the issue happening? Munib, everyone is saying I'm not lagging, so basically it's a problem at your end. Okay, guys, let's start with the first discussion. I'm going to start off with what we call the 2-sector model. Okay, when you look at the 2-sector model, you're looking at AE is equal to C plus I. For today's discussion, let's assume no investment. Let's only focus on consumption. Okay, so for today's discussion and probably tomorrow's discussion also, I'm going to assume that AE right now is only equal to C. Okay, why am I doing that? Because I want to bring investment later when we're already sorted completely with consumption. Okay, how do we define consumption? Consumption is expenditure by households, right? By households. Consumption is expenditure by households. That's how we define that. Not expenditure by firms, not by government, only by households, which means you and I. On what? On goods and services. Make sense? Does it include foreign goods? It includes all the goods. Consumption is basically all the expenditure by households on goods and services, be it domestic, be it international, right? So that's how we define consumption. And we say this. And by the way, consumption, if you ask me, what is the percentage of your GDP coming from consumption? And the answer is roughly 60%. A huge component for countries come from consumption. If there's any tool that can make your GDP go up, is consumption. If people are consuming more, the consumption is going to be more, your GDP will be more. Make sense? So consumption is probably the most important component when it comes to, and all the government expenditure to save an economy happens so that people spend. Ultimately, it's people's consumption, then they buy goods and services, unemployment will be low, GDP will be high, economy will be growing, and so on and so forth. So, what is this consumption made up of? We say this consumption is made up of two components. We make an equation actually. We say C is equal to A plus B Y. Okay, can we write that? Can we write that? It's really important for us to keep on writing whatever we're doing, because ultimately this knowledge, once you're writing it, is going to be sorted. It's going to be sorted. So please do not write it. It's my request for everyone, even at home, if you're sitting, please write, because it's really important for us to just understand and every component as we go along. Make sense? People at home also, my request is, guys, please do not just write everything what we're writing, and it's going to be useful, and keep on asking me questions. Okay, so this is a kind of like a linear equation that I've made here, right? Where why? Because C is your consumption, okay, and Y is your income. So these are the two variables. Okay, I'm saying this, the consumption kind of like depends on income. The higher the income, the higher the consumption. Do you all agree? Yes. The more richer you are, the more you're going to spend. But it depends on B. B is like a slope. We also call this something I'm going to talk about in detail in a little while, called MPC, or marginal propensity to consume. And then there is A, which is going to be what we call autonomous expenditure. Okay, so I'm going to talk about all of these factors, but if you remember mathematical equation, y equals to mx plus c, right? Remember y, where y is your y-axis and mx is your, m is your slope, x is your x-axis, and c is your y-intercept, which was basically an independent sort of thing. So in a way, this is like c is equal to by plus a. So y being the something on the x-axis, right? So in other words, if I make an equation, I'm going to make that, and I'm going to talk about all of these factors in 1 minute. But if you look at the equation, I'm going to put consumption here, okay, and I'm going to put income here. And what I'm saying is this: it seems like the way your equation looks like is something like this. C is equal to A plus BY, where this part is A, right? There's the slope is B, right? And I'm saying consumption depends on income. More income, more consumption. Okay, seems like the case, more income, more consumption. So what are the various components? But seems like more income, more consumption. If your income is zero, guys, if your income is zero, you're still spending something. Why? How could you have zero income and yet you're spending? You might be eating up your saving, or you might be, if you don't have the money, what would you do? You might be borrowing. Who said that? Good. Who said that? Good job. Borrowing. You might be borrowing. Hopefully, you're not stealing. In this model, we don't say stealing, but you might be borrowing. So there is some expenditure which, irrespective of whatever your income level is, you have to spend on it. For example, if you ask me if your income goes to zero, what are the expenditure you will be doing? I'll be like, I will be spending on healthcare, my children expenditure, the school fee, for example, the rent of my house. All of this is my A, right? Or autonomous expenditure. Autonomous means independent of national income. So independent of your income, autonomous basically means exogenous. And exogenous means not dependent on Y, on national income or your income if you're individual. It doesn't depend on income. Irrespective of whatever, this is what we call our necessary spending, which, irrespective of whatever your income is, you have to spend on it. And go back to this, guys. Look at this. Irrespective of how rich you are, this A is something which you need to spend. So let's pick a random point like here, like Y1. In this Y1, you have A plus BY. What is this BY component? BY component is what we call dependent on Y. There is some expenditure that you do, some consumption of you is completely autonomous, while the rest depends on your income. The richer you are, the more the BY component. The higher the Y, the more the BY component. So some consumption, and this BY, I'm going to write this here. This BY, we call this BY, and I need to sort of zoom this, guys, because it's difficult to read. So guys, this BY is what we call induced expenditure, which is expenditure which is dependent on Y. The more the income, the more the expenditure. That's what. So Keynesians accept that consumption is not necessarily all income. Some part of the consumption you need to do, irrespective. And that's why there is a C is not BY only. C is A plus BY. So some independent expenditure or exogenous, or and some is what we call induced expenditure. Now somebody should ask, tell me, what is the formula of B? What is B? What is B? What's the formula of B? What's the formula of slope, guys? In other words, can I say B is equal to change in Y over change in X, which in this case will be change in C over change in Y. In other words, can I say B is simply, I'm going to come back to later, Niba, in 1 minute. Can I say B is simply for every extra dollar, how much do you end up consuming? For every time I give you $1, if you, let's say, consume 20% or consume 80%, then I'll say your propensity or inclination to spend is 0.8. For every dollar, 80% is consumed, which means your propensity to consume is 0.8. What do you do with the rest of the money? You save, which means this is called marginal propensity to consume. Okay, I can also write this as MPC. And we say this MPC plus MPS is equal to 1. What is MPS? Marginal propensity to save. So if I give you $1, and if you end up consuming 0.8 of it, how much will be the MPS? 0.2. Makes sense, guys? So 0.2 will be your MPS, which means MPS is equal to 1 minus MPC, or in this case, MPS is going to be 0.2. So guys, we say there is a tendency for people to, because in a model, in a simple model, we don't end up consuming everything. Sometimes we save something. That's why it's not A is equal to C is equal to A plus Y. Okay, it's A plus BY, because some factor will reduce your income. That is your tendency to save. And by the way, he might be a big saver, I might be not a big saver. You know what I mean? MPC will be different for different people. Older people, they found MPC is much higher. Younger people, they found MPC is much lower. Rich people, they found MPC is much lower. Why? Poor people, they consume everything. You give 25,000 rupees or 30,000 rupees, for example, to your driver, he may end up consuming everything. He might actually ask you for money every end of the month, because he's like, you know what, I had a shortfall. So MPC is found to be, and for rich countries, by the way, rich countries have a very, very low MPC and very high MPS. Poor countries have a very, very high MPC. So what is MPC? MPC is your marginal propensity to consume. We will talk about that. So there is a thing that can make your MPC to change. But guys, we say this now. Aniba, I want to come back to your question. So Aniba, what we say is this: even if your income is zero, even if your income is zero, do you end up consuming everything? Do you not spend anything? And the answer is no. Even if your income is zero, there is some spending that you are doing, which is called autonomous spending, which is on necessities that you need to spend irrespective of whatever your income is. And if you don't have the income, you may borrow, or you eat up your past savings. Eating up your past savings is called dissaving. Either you dissave, or you borrow, but you got to pay for this kind of expenditure. You can't tell your, for example, spouse or your children that, hey, you don't have the money, so no food. You got to sort of have that expenditure done, which is the minimum expenditure you require. Are you all with me? Does that make sense? So guys, this is the first part of the discussion that I want to sort of talk about. So when you look at consumption has two parts to it. Consumption is equal to A plus BY. A is autonomous expenditure, which means independent, doesn't really depend on income. But BY is the induced expenditure. It depends on income. How much of it is depend on income depends on B. B is the slope of this line, which means it tells us the tendency of you sort of to end up consuming. Okay, and we say this, that B is your marginal propensity to consume, because if I give you $1, so there's a change in Y, there will be change in C, and there will be a change in S. If the change in Y is $1, change in C, for example, is 0.8, and change in S is like 0.2, then my MPC is 0.8 and my MPS is 0.2. So if for every extra dollar, how much do you end up consuming? For every extra dollar, how much do you end up saving? Make sense, guys? Yes. That's a good question, because rich people have a low MPC. It seems like some part of your MPC may depend on income, but some part of MPC may also depend on your nature. Some people are spendthrift, some people are not spendthrift, some people do not spend too much, some people spend. So there are a lot of things that may depend. No, actually, it's true. Rich people end up saving more. Even if they don't want to, they still end up saving more, because they have a lot of income. So we'll talk about what are the factors that affect consumption, and that would basically help us understand MPC. But we say one thing: on average, rich countries have a low MPC, poor countries have a high MPC. No, but MPC is more like a tendency. It's not. C may depend on all of that thing that you're saying, but MPC is more like on average. Because we're making an economic model for the whole economy. Now we need to find this kind of like a general value for the whole economy. So we are kind of finding a slope for the consumption pattern of the whole economy. And so we say normally poor countries like Pakistan may have an MPC of 0.8 or 0.9, but rich countries might have a 0.6, 0.5 kind of an MPC. Like a dollar given to a poor country may end up almost getting consumed versus a dollar given to a rich country will say savings to also be 50% or 60%, 40% versus consumption to be like 60%. Okay, guys, I'm going to end on this note, guys. I'm going to continue this discussion tomorrow. And we're going to start from the beginning again to look at this model and we'll build upon this. Okay, tomorrow I'm going to give you numbers. We'll do an example as well. Okay, thank you, guys. Have a good day.